Hello everyone, welcome to Rise of Coding. In this video we will build a news website using React and News API, where you can browse news by category and search for specific topics within any category. And easily navigate through pages with pagination. So before we start, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I already created a React app, and you can find the starting project in the link in the description below. Let's start by creating the navbar component. First, we will import the CSS file. Then we will create an array of news categories. And we will create the nav element to act as the container for the navigation bar. Inside the nav we will create a div to hold the app logo. After the div we will create an unordered list to contain the category items. Inside the UL, we will map over the categories array. And we will return li for each category with a unique key. After the UL we will create a div to hold the search bar section. Inside this div, we will create a form, and inside the form we will create an input field and submit button. Now let's add the navbar component to the app.js. Now let's save and have a look. Now we will install Axios to fetch the latest news from the News API and display it in our app. We will use React context to manage the state across our app. So inside the src, I will create a context folder and set up a context.js file. Now we need to sign up for the News API to get an API key. So let's move to newsapi.org, and you can find the link in the description below. First you need to create an account. Then we will click on the Get API Key. And then copy your API key. And store it in API key variable. And then we will add the base URL. Before making the API request, we need first to create a context to hold and manage the states and functions and making them accessible across the app. Then we will create a custom hook to access the news context easily. Then we will create a news provider to manage news data and functions. And we will return the news context.provider, which provides this data to child components via context, making it accessible throughout the app. Inside the news provider, you will add the API key and the base URL. And we will add article state to store the fetched news articles, and the initial value will be an empty array. And adding the loading state to track whether the data is still being loaded, and the initial value will be true. And adding the error state to track errors during the API call, and the initial value will be null. Then we will create the fetch news function as an async function to make the API call. First, we will set the loading state to true before the API call to indicate that data is being fetched. And we will set the error state to null to reset any previous error message. Then inside the try block, we will use await axios.get to send a GET request to the base URL with /top headlines endpoint. And we will pass the API key in the params object to authenticate the request. And we will store that in a response variable. Then we will update the article state to response.data.articles. Inside the catch block, if an error occurs during the API request, we will catch it and update the error state. And finally, we will set the loading state to false. Then we will use the useEffect hook to call fetch news function when the app starts. Then we will include all state variables and functions in the value of the provider. Inside the app component, we will wrap the main content with news provider. This will allow all child component to access the news context and its data. To make sure the API request is working, we can console log the response.data.articles. If you open the console, you can notice we got an error, so let's back to the context.js and fix it by adding the country param. Now the API request is working well, and we have the news articles data. Now we need to display this news articles, so let's create newsfeed component. First we will import newsfeed.css file. We need to import the useNews context hook from context.js file. Then we will destructure articles and loading and error from it. And then we will return a div with the class name of newsfeed to act as the main container for the news content. Inside this div, we will check if the articles array is empty, using articles.length is equals to 0. And if it is empty, we will display a p tag with a message of no news was found. And if articles exist, we will return a div with class name of newsGrid. Inside this div, we will map over the articles and return news card component for each article, and we will pass the article as a prop. Now let's create news card component. First we will import newscard.css file. Then we will receive the article prop. And we will return a div with class name of newscard. Inside this div, we will add an image and the src will be article.url2image. And class name of news image. Then we will add a div with class name of news content. Inside this div, we will add h3 with article.title. And a p tag with article.description. and anchor tag with href of article.url. Now let's save and import this component at newsfeed component. Then we will import the newsfeed component at the app.js. Now let's save and have a look. Some article images may fail to load, so to handle this, we will add a default image. Inside the news card component, we will import the default image from the assets folder. Then we will create a function that ensures the default image is displayed if the original one fails to load. In the src attribute of the image tag, we will conditionally display the original image or the default one. Then we will add on error to the image tag, which will trigger the handle image error function whenever an image fails to load. Now let's save and have a look. Inside the newsfeed component, we need to handle the loading state and error state. So we will say, if loading is true, we will return loader component. And if error is true, we will return error message component and pass the error as a message prop. Now let's create these components. We will import the loader.css file. And we will return a div with class name of loader. Now let's create the error message component. We will import first the CSS file. Then we will receive the message prop. And we will return a div with class name of error message and display the message. Now let's import these component inside the newsfeed component. Now we will create a pagination component to navigate through multiple pages of news articles easily. But first we will go to the context.js file to add current page state to track the current page number. Then we will add another state of total results to store the total number of available articles. Then we will update the fetch news function to include page and page size parameters to fetch a specific number of articles for the current page. Then we will update total results state to response.data.totalResults. Then we will modify the use effect to include current page to trigger fetch news function whenever the current page changes. Then we will include current page and set current page and total results in the context provider's value. Now inside the newsfeed component, we will destructure current page and set current page and total results from use news context. Then after this div, we will add the pagination component. And pass to it current page and set current page and total results as props. Now let's create pagination component. First we will import pagination.css file. Then we will receive the props. Then we will define the page size to show how many articles will display at the page. And we will calculate the total pages by dividing total results by the page size. And rounding up to ensure all results are displayed. Then we will create an empty array for the page numbers to hold the list of page numbers. Then we will use a for loop to fill it with numbers from 1 to total pages. Each iteration adds the page number to the array, creating a list of pages for pagination. Then we will create a handle page click function that takes a page number as an argument. Inside the function, we will update the current page state to the page number. Additionally, we will use window.scroll2 to scroll the page smoothly to the top. Then we will return a div with the class name of Pagination. Inside this div, we will add a previous button. This button will be disabled if current page is equals to 1. And when it clicked, it will call handle page click function to navigate to the previous page if the current page is greater than 1. Then we will add a UL with class name of page numbers. Inside this UL, we will map over the page numbers array. And we will return li that display the page number. The li have class name of page number, and we will add active class name if the page number is equal to current page. After the UL, we will add a next button. This button will be disabled if current page is equal to total pages. And when it clicked, it will call handle page click function to navigate to the next page if the current page is less than total pages. Now let's import the pagination component to the newsfeed component. Let's save and have a look. The next button and previous button are working well. But the page number isn't working, so let's go back and fix it. We will add an onClick to the li to call handle page click function to navigate to the selected page number. Now let's save and have a look. Now we need to filter the news articles to display articles based on the selected category. So let's move to context.js file, and we will add category state to store the current category of news articles. Then we will add the category to the params object. Then we will update the useEffect function by adding the category to the dependency array to refetch the news articles whenever the category state changes. Then we will create change category function to update the category state whenever select a new category. Then we will include category and change category function in the context provider's value. Inside the navbar component, we need to import the useNews context hook from context.js file. Then we will destructure category and change category from it. Then we will update this LI by attaching an onClick event that triggers the change category function with the selected category name as an argument. And we will add active class name if the current category matches category name. Now let's save and have a look. Now we need to create the search function. So let's move to the context.js file. We will create query state to store the search term and use it as a filter for fetching articles. We will modify the fetch news function and include the query as queue to the params object to allow the API to return news articles that match the search term. Then we will include the query in the dependency array of the useEffect hook, so whenever the search term changes, the fetch news function is called automatically. Then we will include the setQuery in the news context provider value. Inside the navbar component, we will destructure setQuery. Then we will create handle search function that takes event object as an argument. Inside this function we will use prevent default function to stop the form from reloading the page when submitted. Then we will create a query variable to store the value from the search input field. Then we will use trim function to remove any spaces from the input. Then we will update the query state. And then we will add on submit to the form to trigger the handle search function. Now let's save and have a look.